Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, where we have created a live discussion and small online community that incorporates magic, spirituality, and energy. Having you here with us means the world, and we want to know that you're here. So, if you could, some housekeeping things. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and click that stream so we can see your comments. If you're on YouTube, just let us know you're here. We'll try to include you in the discussion, which today our topic is rites of passage, honoring our life changes. Now, this discussion is an interesting one. I really hold a lot of reverence for Katrina in this because what I have seen participating in her classes and also like just of her work and how she deals with people, she seems to really understand what it means to be at the doorway and helping people kind of pass through that door. And to me, we have all these mini rites of passage moments that then and then we have larger ones as well. So I really feel like this is this is Katrina's wheelhouse here. But before we get too deep into those topics, we have a couple of introductions to make, and then a couple of hellos to the folks that are already popping online. We see you, Bram and Debs. So, um, introductions. I am Dahlia Rhodes. I'm the founder of the Conduit School, and I serve my community as a healer, a teacher, and a conduit for high vibrational energies. I do this by guiding my students through spiritual development, energy work, meditation, crystals, and really anything I can get my hands on in order to make it spiritual in some form or capacity. And I do this because I believe that we need to expand the way that we look at healing, reconnect with our bodies, and feel more empowered than we ever thought possible. I also, I don't know if you can hear it, but I have a feathered co-host in my background who seems adamant um, in her desire to be a part of the show. So you may hear some squeaks, you may hear something that sounds like a chicken. It is a parrot who is obsessed with me. So we have a guest star, but other than that, I'm not doing this show by myself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katrina Rasbold. I'm half of Crossroads Occult at crossroadsoccult.com. My husband and I make and sell handmade magical products such as hoodoo items and different types of magical tools to use. We also do spell work for people. I do readings for people, and I'm also a published author and have written several books on different metaphysical subjects. And let's see what else. Coven leader of more than 20 years, or about 25, 26 years. And one of the reasons that I'm very invested in rites of passage is that I'm old. And so I've had a lot of experience with rites of passages, both hosting them for people and experiencing them for myself. And also have seen some of the places where, as a culture, we may be falling down in terms of honoring those different times in our lives. And one thing I really want to point out regarding our subject is that rites of passage, they're very culturally based, and we are good at some and we're not so good at others. And they really start before we're born, because a lot of times our mothers had baby showers to honor that we were coming. And, you know, from the get go, we have these different traditions that come up where we ritualistically are honoring certain transitions in our lives. And we now have new ones that have come into play in the last few years. So I thought it would be a great conversation to have about rituals that you are starting in your life, or ways that you are memorializing the times in your life where you are transitioning from one state of being to another. And I think that when we lost some of those, like for instance, the croning ritual isn't sometimes done anymore. The uh, a Menses ritual for girls that are coming of age often doesn't happen. And when we kind of let those go, I think it made it harder to know where you are in life. And
That makes
what
sense.
has happened as well societally in the last, I'm going to call 10 years, but more so in the last 5 years, is that the lines between childhood and adulthood and have become blurred.
Mm,
And additionally, the demarcation of retirement and old age have become blurred. And the economy is completely to blame for this because when we have children who are 18, 19 years old, there used to be an expectation that you're going to graduate high school. You might take a year off, get a gap year, or just try to figure out what you're going to do. But you're usually going to go to college and learn a skill. You're going to go to trade school and learn a skill. You're going to go into the military. You're going to get married. There's all these adventures that were pending. As soon as you got out of high school, you knew the train was going to start rolling in that direction. And one of the things that was going to happen is, of course, you're going to move out, live on your own, whether you're doing it because you got married or you're doing it because um, it's time. You want to strike out on your own and do your own thing. And once the economy really started getting completely out of hand, we lost the ability to do that. And it got to a place where young people really couldn't afford to have a home on their own. And
mm,
so that's when our families begin to grow again, as they used to be, where we're mostly living under one roof. And so that tends to blur the lines between the fact that you're a functioning adult, but you're still living with your mommy. And so that becomes difficult. That's a hard thing to navigate. I say that having 6 adult children, and they're not adult children. They are adults that I gave birth to when they were babies. They are not children now by any means. I mean, they are prospering, amazing, 6 wonderful people. But to me, they're still children. And so when
mm.
I see them, I have that sense of propriety over them. I have that sense of pride over what they're doing, but I also have that sense of protectiveness. And when they live with you, it's really hard to separate those boundaries. So that's one thing I can see. The other thing is that the economy has caused a lot of people to have to work until they die. And so these are people that are 70, 80 years old still having to have jobs because they can't just live on their social security. They don't have enough money. Maybe they had investments that failed because of different financial crises that have happened in the world. And so they're not having the life they anticipated having when they made plans for their old age. So my point with that is that it becomes, I think, increasingly more important to honor these rites of passages that we have so that we kind of know where we are during those times when everything is blurred out. And that extends into our spiritual life too. When I did the BioU classes, we had 3 different levels of engagement or of classes that people were taking, and I knew right away it was going to be important to people for people to have diplomas, to have a graduation, even though that diploma is not leveraging you into a job per se. It's letting you know you completed something, that you worked hard and you did something. So yeah, I think that our rites of passage are becoming more important recently, and that's why I feel like this conversation is so vital.
I've seen, I've seen a slight comeback on the celebrating the first of a person's menses,
Mhm.
and like I think they were called like red tent
Yes,
something
from the
gathering.
Anita Diamond book.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I was happy to kind of see that come forward because it felt important not to make it embarrassing in the way that it had become. I mean, I remember, remember kind of going through that myself and like hiding the tampons under a magazine or whatever, you know what I mean, or the pads. And so and it's not a time of shame. It really is something to be celebrated. And recognizing on my spiritual path where that went from embarrassing to empowering, noticing an energy shift within that time of the month, and knowing where my power went. So anytime that during that time of the month, if I extended myself to others, it was draining. But if I took the time to kind of go within and um, refuel, recalibrate, and I think I've said it on the show before, but I also use that time for forgiveness practices because of the shedding of the lining and what that is connected to in terms of chakras and where we so what I've found as a healer is that um, a lot of people, myself included, and I won't say everybody, I'm learning to stay away from labeling everybody in a particular way, but I've found that that a lot of stored energy regarding bitterness, anger, frustration, and resentment can be in that space. And so, forgiveness rituals and then shedding that at the same time, personally, has been a powerful experience. I've encouraged others to see how it works for them. But to me, that's a one of those many rites of passages that I can kind of cling to in my own life, but it didn't become important until I started recognizing, like you said, that I felt lost and trying to anchor into something that was meaningful to me. So,
You know, I only have one daughter and five sons, and you really it's a matter of reading the room and knowing the audience. If I had had a red tint ceremony for my daughter, she would have fucking died, and not in a good way. She was not someone who would be receptive to that idea. She might now, if she were just to start her period now, she would be in a better frame of mind for it than she was at the time when she started her period. And we have these things like the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, which are transitionary and are lovely. We've had some of the things. There was a. Do you remember the? I don't. I want to say it was the Promise Keepers, but the group of people where the girls dedicated themselves to their daddies,
oh
so
no.
to speak. Yeah,
Oh
and there
no.
was a ring, the whole bit. And it was really fucking creepy, man. It was so creepy. But it was a matter of she's pledging her virginity kind of into her dad's keeping, saying in honor of her dad, she will not be careless with her
Oh,
virginity.
okay.
The
Okay, that's not
idea
where my head
is
went.
sweet. The wording was terrible. The premise was terrible. So there have been some real criminal aborted ideas at Rites of Passage that were just scary. And, of course, that's situational. The people who were in it probably really loved it. I really liked, and this is might just be the South in me. I always wanted to have a coming out ball. I wanted to be a debutante and be presented. And, when you're butt ass poor in Kentucky, that's just not going to happen. But I always would just read about that and watch it, in some of the Regency era films and things like that. And I thought that was such a fascinating thing to be presented by your family into
Yeah.
society.
Well, and that's cross cultural. So the I don't know where it stems European wise, but it resembles the like the quinceañera um,
Yes.
that is in Hispanic culture, and so
Hmm.
I recently got to help my own daughter celebrate that year, and it was interesting researching kind of what happens in terms of those presentations, and it's very daddy daughter focused. And then mom kind of does all the planning and things of that nature. So it's an interesting um, it's interesting to see sort of how we distinguish these times of transition and then adulthood, because that's typically what we are looking at as far as Rites of Passage is you becoming an adult, and then there are others after that. And I also recognize there are some cultures, like one of the things that came to my head was in a couple of maybe certain sects of Hinduism, there will be a person who is distinguished as a saint or as a deity, and they grow up, and when they hit puberty, there will be a celebration or something that takes place that either marks them as, yes, the saint that they were, that they embody, or relieves them of their duties. Like there's one I recall from a documentary, I think it was called Where is God, with Morgan Freeman or something like that. I brought it up on the show before because it fascinates me. But anyway, they followed this one young woman who, once she came of age, she actually stopped being the saint, whatever saint or goddess that she was embodying, and there would be another one sort of waiting behind her, and this was like the deity or the saint was a child, and so they just kept getting children to do this, and you had celebrations, rites of passages, and so I say all of that to say it seems like rites of passage are that demarcation of you go from here to here, adulthood to womanhood, or um, you know life to more responsibility, et cetera, et cetera.
It was purity balls. That's what they were called.
Oh, oh,
You research purity balls. That's some scary shit. And life to death. I mean, we are absolutely terrible in the westernized world with the way that we manage death. I have gotten up close and personal with that this week. Our family patriarch died this week, and it's been a
oh
really
no.
tough week, and making a lot of hard decisions about what I could and couldn't do in regard to that, and lots of grief. And my parents are both passed. My grandparents are all dead. So it was just, I've had a lot of experience with death. I have many friends who have died recently, and it's been a hard way to go, and that's one place that as Americans we often don't know how to manage our feelings and our expressions. We've kind of gotten sideways in the last several years because COVID kept us from having funerals,
Mm.
and so our ability to grieve together was greatly diminished. And so that's, we have baby showers when we're born. A lot of us have birthday parties every year to honor becoming a year older. Sometimes we have parents that will make a celebratory move when we go into school, or when we have our graduations from middle school or junior high or high school. When we get into college, have another graduation. There's a lot of marriage, our engagements, our when we are having our babies, we have a whole new flow of rites of passage now because we've got gender reveal parties, which nobody ever heard of. Nobody could have really done 20 years ago. Um, so that's kind of a new thing that's happening, and we have also parties that happen, and passages that happen when people come back from being deployed in the military. So there's many different new kinds of life that are happening that are often demarcated with ritual behaviors. Um, I always thought that, back to the death thing, that we should have death doulas. I mean, we have people that assist you through birth when you're giving birth. And I've always thought we needed people. God bless wonderful hospice people. I've seen some incredible ones that assist the family and assist the person who's dying through the death process, which is just so complex and uncomfortable for most people involved with it. And we still are not good at knowing how to manage that. I've got a friend, Nicole Parker Adams, who is a licensed marriage and family counselor, and she has been very much an advocate for the fact that psychologically, the field of psychology doesn't manage grief well. They're
Mm,
they're just not good at it. They're not taught the tools to effectively deal with grief. They look at grief as something that needs to be fixed in the person, or
right.
that has a fixed timeline. Like, you should, okay, it's been 3 years since your husband died. You should be out there dating. You should be doing something. You shouldn't still be grieving. What's wrong with you? And we just, as a society with grief, we don't have a comfort with holding space for another person's grief for very long. They'll do it at the beginning, maybe for a year, but then it's just worrisome. Then it's just a real oppression for the person that's having to hold space,
Mm,
because they are not feeling their grief as intensely anymore, and you remind them of their grief. So it's just a place where we're really falling down.
yeah, yeah. I think that's probably why there is an increase in interest in shadow work, in shamanism. And I have seen some certifications out there for being a death doula. So it does seem like we're attempting to turn corners for sure, but that is a I heard somebody phrase this regarding something else, but a slow turning ship, you know, especially when it comes to alternative therapies surrounding rites of passage entering the medical system, in hospitals and things like that, walking up to one and saying, "Hey, I'm a death doula and I'd like to support your
Mhm.
clients," would be like something that is absolutely unheard of. So,
Part of that also is because, and I worked at the healthcare industry for many, 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 many years. I was a medical transcriptionist, and as a medical transcriptionist, we worked on the actual hospital ward. So we're right there in the thick of things. And really, anytime someone dies, to the medical industry, that is a failure. And so they're not really always good at dealing with the fact that they could not keep this person alive. And most of the practitioners I know, meaning the nurses and the people who are taking care of the families, are very compassionate and are realistic. They're very pragmatic about death. And so they're able to be there and hold space. But when we get into the medical field of the doctors and such, they're not always great at it. And again, it's because it represents some kind of failure on they feel on their part, that they could not use all the tools available to keep this person alive. Of course, none of us are going to live forever. I'm of an age now, I'm 61, I'll be 62 in September, where, and I've said this on the show before, when you die and you're over 60, people no longer kind of cock their head to the side and go, "Oh my God, she was so young." There's it's normal to die in your 60s. And there was a long, long, long time where many people didn't live to their 60s. And
right.
so to be able to do that is certainly a privilege. But I mean, I'm not ready to go. Make
We're
no
not ready
mistake.
for you to go.
Make no mistake. If I die tomorrow, y'all better know she was not on board with that. She was not ready. She didn't want any part of it. And I admire people that are genuinely able to come to terms with the idea of their own mortality and to make friends with that. And I mean, no, for all of the spiritual work, shadow work I've done, I'm not there. So death is a weird place for us.
Yeah, I don't think there is anything there's nothing I can recall that distinctly prepared me for death. I'm very much okay with dying whenever. Um I don't know that I'd say I was ready, but there was a place where in my life where early on where I feared it, and now I'm just kind of like mentally I'm like, okay, it's coming for everybody, and um making attempts to do my best until that day comes is kind of where I mentally am. Now, if I could find out I have cancer tomorrow, then we'll revisit the topic and see if I'm ready. And I'm certainly not ready to see friends go through that process. But I don't know if they're, like you said, you mentioned all the shadow work that you've done and things that you've gone through. You're not ready for it, and I really have to say I don't think there is anything that properly prepares you even at the end. And as we clarify and discuss this inability to really hold space for grief, I think we also don't really hold a lot of space for life.
Hmm.
There used to be these bigger celebrations about life entering the world or transit or changing, right? Not transitioning out, but changing in some way. And it's more common now for me to hear people say, I don't want to bring life into this world because of how it is.
Hmm.
And so there's just not this excitement um, happening. So if you had to, like, let's pick a life change and a way to honor it, like what does honoring a life change look like for you, Katrina?
I think that that's an excellent question. It really is. I think that that's so individual. There are people that prefer to honor their passages in very private ceremonies with just themselves. I enjoy being around the people that I care about for my own and to share that with them. And I like some sort of ritual acknowledgement or ceremonial, I guess I should say, acknowledgement is nice. Um, I was raised in the Christian church, and so there's a lot of ceremony attached to that. And so I think that's what it would look like for me. Would just be that time being acknowledged by friends and family, um, and then in a ceremonial aspect as well.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
one thing, for an example. So I have two grandchildren,
Mhm.
and they are 18 and 19. I think they're actually, no, that's a lie. Oh my gosh, they're 19 and they're 18 and almost 20. And so those are my only grandchildren from the six kids that I have, but there's also a 10-year gap in the 3 and 3 of my kids. So I have another wave coming. I've got Delina will probably have children with Avery. Um, Dylan has just gotten married, and he and his wife want to have children. Nathan was born wanting children. He's always
Oh,
wanted to be a dad. So, I mean, I have more grandchildren likely coming, and I was feeling very isolated in that, except for Eric, because Eric is just a fiend for kids. He loves playing with little kids. He was a really hands-on dad, very busy with them, actively playing with our kids all the time. They had a game called Frogs of Pain and Death that they played, and that was where they beat on each other with stuffed frogs. And they had, I know it's a thing. Cars and blocks was another thing. They had a big bin of Matchbox cars and a whole bunch of blocks of different sizes, and they'd build all these cities and drive their little cars through them. And it was always something. They were always busy playing. And so I was feeling very kind of alone grandmother wise. And then Avery's mother, my daughter's partner, um, I'm friends with her. We knew each other before the kids knew each other. And I happened to be with her for the first time in a long time, and she was just fired the fuck up, man. She was just like, I'm just have do you think Avery and Delina are ever gonna have babies? And I said, well, yeah, she really wants to, and I think Avery does this too. And she goes, you don't understand. They're my only hope. All of my other babies are gay and they don't want children. and, and she's like, they're my only hope for grandchildren. I've got to have grandbabies. So we got off on this long tangent about, okay, Lily, well, I've had a stab at being a grandparent. You haven't, so you get to pick your grandma name because we can't have the same grandma names. It's got to be different names. So you think on it, and she did for a month. She contemplated what she wanted her grandmother name to be, and I was just hands off. I wasn't choosing anything until she picked, and then I'd pick mine. Now with my first children, I was named Mamaw. And that's sweet. It's very Kentucky. It touched my heart. I just never cared for Mamaw at all. Didn't want Mamaw. So I decided that in the interim, the 10-year gap, I would change my moniker. And so Lily picked Grandma Lily, which is so precious and so monsters. I love it. It's very Lily. So she's going to be Grandma Lily, and I'm going to be Nana. And Eric has always been Papa. All the grandkids have called him Papa all along. So that's sort of, even though it's not ceremonialized, it's a rite of passage for us to get to huddle together and pick out what our grandparent names will be. And it's something you got to think about. Now, I went back home in 2009, and my cousin's wife, Sherry, had grandchildren. I said, "So what do your grandchildren call you?" And she goes, "Oh, they call me Gigi." And I'm like, God damn it, that is so good. Why didn't I think of Gigi, man? Gigi is great. Because I never like, oh, grandmother, or you got to have your name down. Now, my youngest grandchild, Aiden, for whatever reason, always referred to me as Rasbold. He always called when he was little, and I think what happened is his parents started referring to me as Grandma Rasbold to distinguish me
Oh.
from Grandma Silva, and he just picked up on the end of it. And so, I swear to God, I was in Kmart one time, and from all the way across the store, I hear this little voice go, Wasbo! And I look up and Aiden is in his cart just waving like crazy. He was maybe almost 3 years old. He was real little. And so yeah, Nana and Papa, that's what the new generation's gonna get. So I'm pretty excited for that. So yeah, the as you get older, the number of rites of passages you're going to have is fewer and fewer. And so I think in a way they become more precious because there aren't as many of them.
Bram seems to agree with the preciousness. I hear you saying it becomes fewer and fewer, and what moves through me is that you kind of become the storehouse for those rites of passage. Like I said in the beginning, you get the opportunity to say you've seen more, you've participated in more, and now here it is. I mean, even in your interaction with the other grandma,
Mhm.
it was like, oh, well, this is kind of how it goes. And you brought this space of excitement into an already exciting situation for them. So that to me is just absolutely beautiful.
Well, and
Um,
Lily's probably 10 years younger than I am, I would guess.
oh, okay.
Yeah, at least. And so this is, yeah, she's ramped up. She's ready for some grandma time to happen. So no pressure, kids. I mean, Eric's
Um,
Eric's thing is fontanelles. That's his grandpa thing. Is he loves their little fontanelles. He's like, oh, you need to feed this baby's fontanelles dipped down.
oh, he likes feeling the soft spots
Yes, the
on their
soft
neck.
spot in the
Oh
head is
gosh,
the technical
that
term is
sounds
the fontanelle.
always
And
creeps me out. I love children, but it just
they are
it's too
so
much.
much, those soft spots are so much more resilient than anybody knows. It used to be when I was growing up, absolute terror over a baby's soft spot because its little brain, is just right there. But I tell you, if those soft spots were as delicate as people think they are, it'd be a lot less babies in the world. Because man, we manhandle those kids. Debs is saying that they were supposed to be an Oma. I had a friend who was an Oma. I think it's a German derivative, and that's a wonderful, wonderful name too. Now I had a granny, and she was very much a granny. I mean, there was no escaping that she was granny, and she had 27 grandchildren, and the first one, Carolyn, was the one that gave her the name Granny. And I had a grandma, and so those were my introductions to grandmothering. Eric's family had a Graham, and the other grandparents had already died by the time that the kids were born, so they didn't really have interaction with them. So, what were your grandparents called?
Grandma and grandpa. It
That's
wasn't
good.
really super special. I was, for a long time, the only grandchild. So I was spoiled. I was also my mom's fifth try. So, the babies before me didn't make it. So I was
Wow.
like, I was porcelain and, like
Mhm.
with gold filigree. Like I was held
And
very
you're
precious.
still close with your mother, right? Am I
Say again?
remembering? Am I remembering correctly that you're still close with your mother?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I thought
100%. I
so.
mean, the only not closeness we had was like my 10th grade year in high school, and I was like, I'm moving out. And she was like, no, you're not. And it was this whole thing
Oh.
anyway.
So
Um,
we just had Mother's Day. Do you have any Mother's Day rituals?
no. So I recognize the importance of Mother's Day, and but it just does not appeal to me as, like, me personally. It doesn't appeal as anything other than a day off. Like,
Mhm.
that's my only ritual. Is I don't want to have to think that day. I don't have to think. I don't have to plan. I want to be able to exist. It and Like, somebody asked me that, and they're like, "Oh, well, what are you gonna do?" And I was like, "Not have to do anything. Isn't that isn't that the whole point?" I know it's very sacred for many, many people, and I think we should keep celebrating it. And maybe the conversation here is, what does that celebration look like, and how might others honor it? I mean, if you're the kind of person that needs theatrics, or big, a big Mother's Day moment, there's nothing wrong with candles, dressing up in your favorite outfit, and you know, having everybody read poetry to you that they wrote, took a month to write,
Taking
whatever.
notes.
You know, I think that these rites of passage, whatever they are for you, should demonstrate, kind of like what we do in ritual and ceremony, which is to hold space for something. So if on the topic of Mother's Day, if we're celebrating mothers, what I mean, I hope that what's meaningful to your mother. Mine is like peace, no conflict, and again, not having to think because my brain is always switched on. So trying to plan the thing before the thing, after the thing, and pre the thing. So yeah, I don't have regular Mother's Day rituals, or rites of passage,
Both
so
of
to
my
speak.
husbands, it's not that they were unsupportive of Mother's Day,
Oh,
but they were both, and we're talking, I was married to the first one for 17 years. I've been with Eric for 27 years. And so that's a lot of husband time. And they're both just of the idea of, you're not my mother. So they didn't even have the idea that something should be done. And I'm pretty low maintenance. All I need is, all of my kids need to remember, and they need to message me. That's all I need. Just reach out and acknowledge. And they all did. They were real good. Delina was in Oregon for this weekend. And so she knew she's going to be gone. She had to go to her father-in-law's wedding. And she was just on Friday, man. Friday. Mom, I'm in the car. We're on our way to Oregon. I just want to say happy Mother's Day because I'm going to be super busy, but I want to make sure I get, she knows what's up.
I do love hearing, the sentiment from my little ones, but as they age, I don't know, Mason, it's a big deal. It's like, oh my God, you're still my mom, and then Anthony is just like, all right, mom, happy Mother's Day. I get what my so my mom and I will usually kind of come together on that day. And so my oldest takes an opportunity to give us both our gifts, but he's a teen. And so we get what my mom refers to as gas station flowers that he picked up just before you know, arriving to us for whatever we're doing is usually dinner. So I enjoy the sentiment, but I don't know if I'd be upset if they didn't say anything as they got older. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like
No.
my birthday is like you better remember that. But
What's
Mother's Day
funny
is like,
is that now that we're divorced, my ex-husband always messages me and tells me Happy Mother's Day.
oh,
Yep. Happy
wow,
Mother's Day, happy birthday. I'm like, "Hey, why couldn't you remember this shit when we were married? That
right,
might
a
have
little too late, but
created a different outcome, sir."
he's trying to heal his karma.
He is. And he's doing a fine job. I've got to say, he's a wonderful friend. So no complaints there.
um,
But I return the favor in that I'm real hands off for Father's Day now. There was a time that I used to really almost overcompensate and try to make Father's Day nice, and now I'm like, no, Mother's Day came first in the calendar year. So how Father's Day is going to go depends entirely on how Mother's Day went.
there's that Virgo pettiness.
True story.
Honoring life changes. What other symbolic days are there? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that feels so sacred to me other than birthdays. Birthdays are a big deal, not just for me, but when I connect with a person on their birthday, like my partners, my kids, I'm like, listen, you came into this world. I'm glad you're still here because so many people aren't,
Mhm.
and so I really really want to make it about them. And so the honoring piece comes down to, what do I know about you? And sometimes it's my collection of, I overheard you say this and I made a note in
Mhm.
my phone. But other rites of passage, I mean, what else feels meaningful to you as far as like
Well,
rites of passage?
Eric and I do not celebrate a lot of things like, Valentine's Day, and we celebrate our anniversary together usually, but I don't expect other people to send me anniversary cards or anything. That's kind of something between Eric and I. So I don't. There's not our kids. I don't even know that my kids know when my anniversary is. I think they do because it's the same day as Eric's birthday.
Oh.
Yeah, because my first husband could never remember our anniversary, so I figured if I got married second time on his birthday, he's always going to know when the anniversary is. And
Smart.
oh, all of it was well orchestrated. But we are just we spend a lot of time together anyway. We go out to eat a lot together. We have a lot of dates. We're always kind of together anyway. So we don't need to isolate specific days that, oh, we're going to go out and do this. Let's go to, Applebee's for the 9700th time and say happy anniversary. So, as a family, I've always put huge stock in Christmas. Um, that I have a lot of almost ceremonies in regard to that. I spend 2 or 3 days baking and cooking, and I have a huge table spread of multi-layer kind of plates with cookies and candies and different things like that, which is hell when you're doing keto. That's really hard. And so this last year, I said, look, guys, here's the deal. I'm tired. It was a big year. We just, uh, it there a lot went on. And so what I want you to do is tell me of all the things that I make for Christmas. Those of you who are going to be here, there were 4 out of 6 that were going to be able to be here. I want you to just give me 2 or 3 of your favorites. So I'll just make your favorites. And damned if they all didn't pick different stuff. So I end up cooking all the time anyway. Food, the expression of food is big in my family for marking traditions. It always has been, going back into, the way I was raised. In the South, we have a potluck for everything. We get together for everything. Family celebrations are really big for me. And it took a lot for me to recognize that my children were not thriving with that.
Oh.
And they're very different personalities. Some of them can't stand each other. in a really visceral way for different things that happen in their lives. And I realized that by insisting that that happened for my benefit, they would do it. They're wonderful about doing it, but they were not happy and it wasn't working. So I had to change the way that we celebrated so that they were not feeling like they're being tortured the whole time that they're with me, so that they could relax and enjoy the event. So yeah, Christmas was pretty big. We used to have big Halloween traditions, but that kind of went away when all of the Halloween things were burned. We had a ladder that we always decorated outside. That was a tradition for us. So I guess we're kind of mixing up traditions with rites of passage, which are different things. But we incorporated rites of passage into our traditions so that
Mm,
we would talk about what we're grateful for the year, what we have experienced in the year. The cusp tradition is so much a part of our lives that we build a lot of our rites of passage around that. But speaking of that, one of the rites of passages that I found people really enjoy is in our coven work. People really like the idea of dedicating. They like the idea of initiations. They like the idea of progressive, like a second level initiation, a third degree initiation, that sort of thing, and having traditions around that to honor what they have done spiritually and how far they've come. And when you have long term spiritual groups that work together, you're really able to see how far that person has advanced since you started working with them. And so that becomes sort of a subfamily that you're creating traditions and rites of passage honoring with. And
mm.
that, when we get into spiritual, we get into the idea of having croning rituals and sage rituals and hand fastings in addition to weddings. And so it opens up a whole new experience of rite of passage, I think, when you're layering your spirituality onto the idea of rites of passage.
Well, and there was a time when that was just how things
Hmm.
were, um, whether you were pagan or religious. I mean, um, I'm recalling, so having grown up Catholic, rites of passage were built into our lives, you know, and we weren't ultra Catholics where we went to mass and all of that on a constant, but there were definitely some things that happened, you know, around maybe the time that you get your menses to represent womanhood and confirmation and things like that, that were just sort of built into the framework of our belief system
Hmm.
at the time. So, you know, the further that society moves away from that and the closer to development, and, you know, I mean, I wanted to say industrialization, but that's already happened.
Yeah.
So,
No, you're absolutely right that as the Industrial Revolution occurred and more people began working in factories, more people began having very distinct, I am going to work. I work for 9 hours a day, and now I'm coming home, rather than my life is this farm. My life is doing this thing that my father did and that my children will do. When we got away from the spirit of our vocational life being a part of who we are, I think that that had a huge impact on what we did for rites of passage. I think that's absolutely true.
absolutely. When I think about rites of passage now, what would, well, as I'm thinking about it, what how could you be honored in a rite of passage? I mean, you brought up your age, so if we were to
Hmm.
throw a croning ritual for you.
Well, you know, when I turned 50, my coven did have a very nice birthday party for me, and it was around the aspect of croning, and it was really lovely. I don't think I had fully gone through my croning at that time,
Hmm.
uh, but because I was still raising children.
Yeah.
But it was very sweet, and I enjoyed it very much. Um, I don't really there's a way that I got to phrase this up just right. My experience, for instance, with coven work and with my family has been so externalized so that it's as though I'm in a place of service
Mm.
that it's difficult for me to think of what that's like when it returns.
Oh, interesting.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Uh, so I don't really have an answer for that. I get sad sometimes when, weeks will go by and I don't hear from any of my kids or some of my kids. And I think about the fact that my mother and father are both dead and what I would give just to talk with them. My son Joe, I mean, he and I talk almost every day, and he's in Canada. So we hear from each other quite a lot. Dylan lives right next door. He and I, visit quite a bit. Nathan and I are very connected. But, Delina gets very focused on what her life is doing with her work and her partner and running their house and that sort of thing. So days will pass and she won't recognize that she hasn't talked to me or connected with me. And when we do connect, it's great. It's not as though she's shutting me out or anything. She's just a very hyper focused person. And one of my kids I don't really have a lot of communication with. And the other one, David, is just starting a new part of his life where he's got a partner now, and they're moving in together, and so they're setting up their lives. He's just super super crazy busy, and so I think that I think the best thing I could say is just acknowledging and connecting without
Mm.
being under my feet all the time is just great.
So the ideal croning piece would be some sort of return, not from a place of owing you or anything like that, but just a recognition that, these are the kind of things that you did for us. And
Yeah, just say nice things. A
you know,
lot of
I
times, what's funny is a lot of times when my kids are coming, and I'm thinking just in terms of my children primarily, when my children are coming to visit, I'm having to work. I'm having to cook for, 12, 14 people. And so that doesn't feel like
so step one, bring your own
food.
meal.
Yeah.
BYOF, bring your own food.
When Christmas is over and the last packages are unwrapped and everybody's starting to go home, I'm exhausted. I
I
am
bet.
so tired. And I actually, when I'm doing coven work, when it's done and it's been successfully done, and um, everybody's saying their goodbyes and stuff, yeah, I'm pretty tired. So I've been looking for ways to change that and shift that so that I don't feel so exhausted after I've been around people. And I
Yeah.
can't really define whether it's an emotional exhaustion or physical exhaustion or a social exhaustion, but I just
Could
feel
be
really
all of them.
tired. Yeah, so it could be any of those things, and it's not got anything to do with any of the people involved. It's me, it's not them. But I've just gotten to a point in my life, especially after the fire, that I'm very sensitive to being around other people, and
Mm.
I think it just heightens your awareness and your connectivity when there's a trauma.
Oh yeah.
So that I'm just really way more empathic than I was before, which I don't appreciate because I was doing just fine with my empathy before. Thank you very much. Uh, so being around people is hard for me sometimes. So for when you say, what would a croning for you look like? There's a part of my brain that just sort of froze up and started screaming, in that frozen rictus. So like, no. So I don't know.
Look away! Don't come
Yeah.
close.
Throw, throw a steak into the lion's cage, please.
And again, that's kind of the great thing about this discussion is getting to see the different aspects. Like, honoring life changes does not have to mean that you do it up big just because you can. It's more about like if you're gonna. I think about how we honor different deities or different saints or different things like that. You know, Santa Muerte is not gonna want the same thing
Mhm.
as Ishtar or Aphrodite. You know,
Right.
it's
Right.
not gonna be the same.
One of the places where that's really prominent is in weddings.
Hmm.
And that's a, obviously a rite of passage we still, have prominently. And, different people want different things for their weddings. Um, my son Dylan got married at a Denny's up in Cameron Park,
Okay.
and Eric did the ceremony, and it was primarily the paperwork, and have a big wedding later. And Delina has had her wedding planned since she was about 10. And, it's just a big event. I can't remember there's one of the video games that it's patterned after. It's a deal. It is a deal. And it's beautiful and it's very exciting. And for me, my first wedding, I was 16. And my husband to be was flying home from Guam to Kentucky to have the wedding and breaking the bank to do it. And it was very low budget. The entire wedding cost less than $100, but I had friends and family there. It was at my home church, and it was a deal. And then we had it on our 10th anniversary, we had a renewal of vows, and that was also a deal and wonderful, and the dress and the whole bit. Well, Eric and I went to a um, a little wedding chapel up in Reno and got married. And I spent the entire day thinking he was going to back out. And he had just gotten back from Saudi Arabia, and all the way up to the courthouse when he was turning the paperwork, I was like, "Oh my God, he did it! He really did it! Oh my God, we're really married!" I just what? And so I didn't get to go through the feelings that a bride would have. And I've always, like I said, we've been together almost 30 years, and I've always missed that feeling that I got to get married to Eric. And it doesn't mean shit to him. He just, we're married. What's the deal? But for me, it feels like I missed some essential peg along the way. Like I
Hmm.
didn't tag the base. And so that's one place where I can say a rite of passage just didn't fit well for me. Another one is when I got married the first time, I got one gift, and that was a suitcase from my parents. And I thought, wow, that's now they were also putting up the $100 for the wedding, so I can't complain there. But I mean, still, it was just see ya.
Right. Foot
Yeah,
out the door.
yeah,
Let me get that for you. Closes it behind you.
yeah,
So it sounds like as far as honoring like rites of passage and honoring life changes, the key components come into pacing yourself to what you need or what that person needs, especially if it's surrounding grief, and not putting a time limit on it. There's also the importance of these markers spiritually for your journey. So, or well, spiritually or in everyday life, so that you don't, like you said, feel lost. I mean, that felt really important as far
mhm,
as
good.
rites of passage go. Like, not perhaps this is why, like, I hear that a lot in readings and in healing sessions. I just feel lost. Perhaps it
Yeah,
is some of, I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, but perhaps some of it is that lack of pausing to say, hey, you made this big spiritual leap.
yeah,
Take a break. We all see it. It's okay. You know?
yeah. And then also you got to wonder, do you want the wedding or do you want a marriage? Those are two very different things. And given the choice, I'd prefer to have the marriage. And then we get people that don't know what they want. And we see
Sure.
this a lot where, oh no, don't do anything for my birthday. I don't even want to acknowledge it. I don't want anything to do with it. And the day comes and goes. No, you didn't do anything on my birthday. So
Yeah,
that can be challenging when you're trying really hard to read the room and it just isn't coming through. There's
right.
a dissonance between what the person says and what the person wants.
Yeah, it's almost like they'd probably be better off saying, surprise me instead of I don't want.
Yes.
Um, so, you know, rites of passage, honoring life changes, there's so many different ways to approach it. I love that analogy. Do you want the wedding or do you want do you want the like the smaller scale event? What's important to you, outlining what's important to you, and then ritualizing it or ceremonializing it in some way, shape, or form, just as not to say anything more than I see you, right? Like I think we're all sort of in this desperate space to be seen up to a certain point. Like now I'm sure you and I are just like, I don't stop looking. Like we
Yeah.
don't want to be seen, stop looking. Um, but holding space for those who are coming up and still desiring that, and ultimately all of this is leading to connection, it sounds like. So um, in the comments section, we would love to hear from everybody. Just like, how do you honor your life changes? Or after this discussion, are there places where you feel like you could have done more? And where you might say, hey, this is cycling back through next year, and I fully intend to lay out the red carpet for myself, or at least lay out the blanket so I can lay down on my bed. Whatever it is, how will you honor those life changes? And then, we'll catch up with you in the comment section. But for now, we will see you guys next time. Thank you for joining. Bye, everybody.